We will we will we will be beginning in just a few moments. If everyone will please make sure that the seat that you are sitting in has the same number as the number on the tag that you're wearing. Thank you.
Test 1 2. Check. Test 1 2.
All right, so just a couple of logistics before we begin. The clocks are in front on the stage. There will be two signs held up, one at 30 seconds when you have 30 seconds remaining and when you have 15 seconds remaining. The fire exits, there are two at the back of the room. There's one at either side of the room. To get out of the building the quickest is out the way you came in, but if for any reason that is blocked, there is another exit down the hall here, and if we have to use it, I will lead us that way. I think anything else that we need to cover logistics-wise? Bathrooms, women's bathroom, out the back, around the corner, over in this corner. Men's bathroom, the same over here in this corner. And there's men's and women's small bathrooms right out at the front of the building. Okay?
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order today's public hearing of the North Carolina Historical Commission on the Monuments Study Committee. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you the public who have come here today to share your opinions, and also to thank the broader public who are observing this committee through streaming over the internet. Secondly, I'd like to recognize members of our Monument Study Committee, and if you would, from my left, this direction, if you could identify yourself and your city of residence. Dr. Fonville.
Chris Fonville from the Department of History at UNC Wilmington.
Valerie Ann Johnson, live in Oxford, North Carolina, Bennett College professor.
And David Ruffin of Raleigh, chair of the committee and the Historical Commission.
Noah Reynolds from Winston-Salem.
And Sam Dixon from Edenton, North Carolina.
We're also pleased to have representing staff today, Dr. Kevin Cherry, who you've already met through his preliminary comments. He is, of course, Deputy Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. He's Secretary to our North Carolina Historical Commission. He's State Historic Preservation Officer, and he's also keeper of the Capitol Building. Also Mike Hill, Chief Research Historian for the department. Parker Backstrom, who is Executive Assistant to the Deputy Secretary, Office of Archives and History. Phil Fagan, who is General Counsel to the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and also General Counsel of the Historical Commission. And Karen Blum, who is Special, oh, there you go, Karen, who's Special Deputy Attorney General for the state of North Carolina, working specifically with the North Carolina Historical Commission on this matter. I'd also like to recognize Reed Wilson and Stacy Myers. They are our Sergeant-at-Arms for today. Reed is the Chief Deputy Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and Stacy is Deputy Secretary of this department. Again, our committee would like to thank the public for your input. Today, not counting the emails and correspondence, as of about 30 minutes ago, we've had 4,226 comments that have been registered on the portal of the department, which is entitled, for those that still would like to comment, it's entitled Comments on the Relocation of Monuments. But at this point, I would feel compelled to remind all of us in the hearing today, as well as the committee, of frankly the limitations of our mandate. Our committee's specific charge is to discuss the possible relocation of 3 Confederate memorials or monuments located on the Capitol Square. They are the Capitol Confederate Monument, the Henry Lawson Wyatt Monument, and the North Carolina Women of the Confederacy Monument. Now, while we are certainly aware that our study committee and the broader historical commission as a whole, that whatever our ultimate recommendations may be, may or may not have influence on the status of other Confederate memorials or monuments throughout the state, it is important to understand again that our specific charge in this committee and at the broader commission is to discuss the 3 monuments that I just alluded to that reside currently on the Capitol Square, otherwise known as Union Square, which is of course the home of the historic Capitol building and the governor's office. Needless to say, this issue engenders passionate opinions. We certainly recognize that, but as I have said before, in the spirit of what we're about today and through this whole process, I truly believe we owe each other the dignity and the decorum of the process and respect for people that have opinions at variance from our own. Today it is our charge as a committee to listen and not to speak, and other than these introductory remarks, you won't hear from me or others anymore. But I do think it's important to understand that this is part of that journey that we are on as a committee to obtain input from both professional and legal experts in the field, as well as obviously from the public at large, as evidenced by this meeting today. Now, in the spirit of moving to hear from you, which of course is the primary reason we're here today, I think it's important to read and be specific on the ground rules for today's public hearing that were adopted by the committee on March the 12th. Number one, and I believe each of you have been given copies of this, but I think it's important to, again, restate these ground rules. Number one, that the study committee public hearing begin at 1:30 and end at 3:30 p.m. Number two, that members of the study committee may attend the public hearing in person or by video conference. That's a moot point, as we have all members present and accounted for. Thank you all for coming. Number three, that the study committee chairman may extend the meeting for an additional 1 hour until 4:30 p.m. if he determines that additional time is needed. Number four, that speakers must sign in using their names and their hometowns. Number five, that speakers be allowed to speak for 1 minute, and that a red warning card shall be held up after 30 seconds has passed. Relative to that point, some of you may have come with prepared remarks, and again, in the spirit of us considering all of your feedback as very serious and heartfelt, we would encourage you, if you can't get through that presentation within a minute, to please submit the written documentation of your comments to staff, and it will be recorded in with the other feedback, because we do take that very, very seriously and do appreciate the amount of time that you may have spent to prepare your comments. Number six, the speakers shall be invited to speak in the order in which they have signed up on a list to be kept by a staff member assigned by Dr. Cherry. However, the study committee chairman may, at his discretion, ask for comments representing another view if it appears that the committee is only hearing one or a particular side that is out of some degree of balance at the discretion of the chairman. Number seven, that speakers shall address the full study committee and shall not direct comments or questions to individual members. Number eight, the study committee hearing is limited to comments about monuments on the Capitol Square, as we've discussed before, and do not include the monument in Chapel Hill. Number nine, no applause or other noises or clapping shall be allowed or tolerated before, during, or after any speaker. Individuals in attendance who violate this rule will first be warned and then be removed from the audience if a second violation occurs. Relative to that, I don't want to remind, but there is statutory consequences to intentionally disrupting public meetings, and so we would certainly trust that that not be an issue. And again, I go back to the comment I had before, irrespective of the passionate component of this issue, we owe it to each other to be respectful of differences of opinion, and in that regard, I would hope we could forego outburst of applause or even disagreement if that is indeed the case. Number 10, if those wanting to speak are lined up outside the auditorium and there is insufficient space to allow their entrance into the auditorium, then after each speaker has spoken, we would potentially ask them to consider leaving the auditorium to make room for others. That may not be necessary today. Number 11 was that everyone walking into the hearing should be handed a copy of these rules, and upon its approval, it be published as part of the public meeting notifications. Again, I would like to reiterate, these were unanimously approved by our committee on March the 12th. One last thing before we commence public comment. I'd like to remind the audience and the public that the next steps for this committee are to continue considering input from the public and from advice that we have solicited, specifically from legal and professional experts in this field. Those are still in progress, and we have obtained some of that requested information and opinion. We have not, at this point, received all. We then, of course, would then begin a process of reviewing these reports and begin to distill the information and the opinions that have been rendered around this particular issue that we're facing. And then thirdly, we would, of course, then move to make committee recommendation that can be taken up by the full North Carolina Historical Commission on our recommendations. So having said that, Dr. Cherry, I would, yes, are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, good point. Dr. Johnson had asked us, again, as a typical courtesy for any meetings in this era, please silence your cell phones to avoid disruptions of any kind relative to the speakers. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Cherry?
Our first speaker, timekeeper, are you ready? Our first speaker, Boyd Sturges of Lewisburg.
Thank you. My name is Boyd Sturges, and I'm a lawyer representing the Sons of Confederate Veterans. My client opposes the removal of these statues. My client can give many sound philosophical, intellectual, and historical reasons why you should not move these or any other historical statues. However, they don't have to do that here because the law clearly protects these statutes. I have filed a detailed legal brief supporting this position, and I would ask you to read it closely. At its core, our argument here is that you don't have to like a law to have to follow a law. Otherwise, you have anarchy and mob rule. Anarchy and mob rule is not how North Carolinians conduct themselves. I respectfully ask you to follow the law and keep these statues where they are. Thank you.
Dr. Boyd Cathy Wendell.
I am former state registrar of the North Carolina State Archives. All of us recognize that our history is complex, and none of us, upon reflection, would agree that every portion of it would be something we like. But when we start moving monuments or relocating them, the question must be asked, where does it stop? What is the criterion for doing that? Let me quote Professor Alfred Brophy, Reif Ivy Professor, University of North Carolina Law School. The monuments, I'm quoting, have become a testimony, physical testimony to history and part of the historical landscape, and not so much an effort to remake how we think. Relocating a monument to a location of far less visibility threatens the memory of our past and facilitates the process of forgetting. Lastly, let me quote the distinguished African-American businessman Bruce Leitner, who is the director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Resource Center. News Observer, March the 9th. Quote, I want to go on record
Harry W. Watt, Statesville.
Thank you. I'm Harry Watt from Statesville. I'm Military Order Stars and Bars here in North Carolina. 1968, I first visited the Capitol as part of a public school student history class. While here, we toured the grounds and saw the monuments to help us better understand our North Carolina history that we studied in our year-long NC history class. Keeping the monuments here at the Capitol is important for our state's school children and in-state and out-of-state visitors. The Civil War area monuments here on the ground specifically point out the hardship of war for children, mothers, and soldiers. Moving these monuments will sharply decrease the number of public get to see them and the stories they tell. These monuments need to stay on the Capitol grounds in their current places for all of us and future generations to ponder.
Rick New, Jacksonville.
I'm a private citizen. I have no title. I am a lay person. I want to tell you what it looks like from the lay side. It looks like what you're trying to do is circumventilate the law. The law is clear. It says when you relocate a statue, it has to be in a place of equal prominence. There is no equal place in North Carolina other than the Capitol grounds that you can relocate these statues. And from the lay point of view, it looks like you're making a clear attempt to circumventilate the law of North Carolina that was passed by our legislature. Thank you.
John Flora, Durham.
I'm a private citizen, and I think the law is very clear. The Monument Protection Act states that these monuments or any other monuments on the Capitol grounds or any other memorial grounds cannot be moved unless they are in the way of construction or endangering the public physically. The law also states that these monuments should be returned to their original location when the construction or repair of these monuments is completed. These monuments have no relation to the Bentonville battleground. They represent sacred history to a vast majority of North Carolinians, and please leave them where they are. Thank you.
Donald Archer, Statesville.
Thank you. The grave of my ancestor, Captain Gabriel Archer, was recently discovered inside the remains of the first church at Jamestown, Virginia. Captain Archer chronicled an expedition to New England in 1602 and was among the first settlers of the Virginia colony at Jamestown in 1607. I'm also related to our 11th president, James K. Polk, who was born in North Carolina. My family has resided in North Carolina since the early 1700s and provided sons and daughters to proudly fight in every conflict, beginning with the first revolution in 1775. I am proud of all my relatives who have answered the call to defend and protect the state and the country, including 4 great-great-grandfathers who answered the call of our great state and the Confederacy. As a proud North Carolinian whose roots run deep in our state and country, I ask that the state memorials to our Confederate men and women deserve to be displayed in the most prominent location in the state as the men and women of this state intended when they were erected, the Capitol Square. Thank you.
William OQuinn, Durham.
Thank you for letting me speak here today. The law protecting these monuments is very clear. I'm not a politician. I'm not a college professor. However, I can understand the law that states these monuments or any other monuments on the Capitol grounds or other memorial monuments cannot be moved unless in the way of construction, physically endangering the public. The law also states that monuments should be returned as close to their approximate location as they can. Regarding the governor's idea to move the monuments to Bentonville Battleground for contextual reasons, the monuments to the women of the state has no context concerning this battle. The private Henry L. White monument has no context with this battle as he was killed at the Battle of Big Bethel in Virginia. The monument to the Confederate soldiers who had fought and died in the war, not only at the Bentonville Battleground, but more battlegrounds. The monuments were dedicated to the suffering, sacrifice, and deaths of North Carolinians during that awful struggle. They should not be removed. Rather, more monuments should be raised.
Teresa M Langley, Raleigh.
I come before you as a representative of the North Carolina Daughters of the Confederacy. Our organization is totally against action by this body or any other to remove or relocate the memorials to our Confederate ancestors. For this body to grant Governor Cooper's petition would be a gross violation of state law. I would also like to register the utter dismay of the United Daughters of the Confederacy that we have been completely left out of this process. Not once has this committee reached out or consulted us for our position on the matter. Our organization and legacy organizations like it are the primary stakeholders in this controversy. It was our families who erected these memorials and to whom these memorials are dedicated. To be entirely shut out while you have consulted and sought guidance only from groups in favor of the governor's petition is not only incredible, but also indicative of your motives.
Frank B. Powell III, Wake Forest.
Thank you. I'm public spokesman for the North Carolina Division Sons of Confederate Veterans. Governor Cooper's request for the removal of 3 Confederate monuments on Capitol grounds is totally inappropriate and outside the authority of the North Carolina General Statutes. For the Historical Commission to grant the governor's request would be a direct violation of the law. None of the provisions allowing for the removal of such objects of remembrance are relevant to the petition. As more than 24 members of the legislature, including Senate President Phil Berger and House Speaker Tim Moore, have publicly stated the provisions under which Governor Cooper wishes to remove these memorials are irrelevant, and any such interpretation of the statute or variant thereof is wholly inconsistent with the spirit and the letter of the law. It is well established in North Carolina that legislative intent controls the meaning of a statute. The law requires Governor Cooper's petition to this body to be categorically denied.
Jake Sullivan, Chapel Hill.
The majority of North Carolinians do not support the governor's petition or any other petition to remove Confederate memorials from their current locations. Recent polling data supports this conclusion. No matter how much society seems to change over time, North Carolinians have always recognized the sacrifices made by our ancestors in times of war. That is why it is essential to preserve and protect the reminders of those sacrifices that we have built in their honor across this state, and especially here at our state's capital. The North Carolina legislature foresaw the need to protect these objects of remembrance, and they passed a law accordingly. The language of the statute is very plain. The only 2 circumstances listed in the statute for relocation are preservation and, when necessary, for construction or renovation. Neither circumstance exists in this situation. Further, there is no site of similar prominence to which these memorials could be moved. In short, the removal of these 3 Confederate monuments would be against the law. Thank you.
Stephen Shepard, Castle Hayne.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you a decorated member of the United States Armed Forces. I find myself absolutely appalled by what I have found in my native state, a state where we have always fought for liberty and justice and where we have always looked out for each other. And I hope we continue to do so. Thank you.
Denis Johnson, Willow Spring.
Appreciate you letting me speak. I'm just a regular redneck from Johnson County, and I think it's wrong to move these monuments. It's against the law. It's stupid. The courthouse would be an eyesore without them. Our ancestors put those monuments there for a reason. They need to stay there for a reason. I'm from Johnson County. We have our monuments in Johnston County, and Wake County needs theirs. I was born right there in St. Mary's Street, Rex Hospital, so I'm from Raleigh. But the monuments need to stay there. It's against the law to move them. I can't believe we got a governor that would even consider that. It's just not wrong. It's against the law. Thank you for letting me speak.
Richard Foy, Raleigh.
Yes, I'm Richard Foy. I'm a decorated combat veteran of the Vietnam War. 47 years ago, that would be 1930, my uncle, received an appointment to West Point, but was denied entrance because he had a birthmark on the left side of his face. He graduated #1 in the class of '34 at North Carolina State University. During World War II, he received a field commission to lieutenant colonel and was a tank commander, was awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, had 2 sons, but he died in 1952 from bad malaria shots given during the war. On March 1971, after 2 tours in Vietnam, returning to ECU, 3,000 students were protesting the war. I stood there in pure humiliation, could do nothing. These stories are about bullying, for having a birthmark, being Catholic, African American, or doing what my country asks. You are the world's only hope for freedom and peace, so don't allow the Hanoi Jane Fondas, corrupt and dysfunctional politicians, news reporters, and entertainers.
Sir, time is up.
Sir, please.
Further divide and bring shame to the Southern Americans who gave their lives.
Sir, please be respectful of the time.
Of Hitler of Germany, Hirohito of Japan, Adolf Putin of Russia, and Kim Jong-un of North Korea.
Emily Keel, Robersonville.
Hi, I'm a native North Carolinian. My grandfather was a Confederate soldier. He was a small farmer, not a slaveholder. I'm sure that he felt at least somewhat supportive of slave labor, but for long into my childhood, as I can recall, none of his descendants have supported the enslavement of our fellow humans. That fight may have been my family's at that time, but we have all changed. Similarly, the Confederate monuments at our state capitol are relics of another time. Their location is a very prominent one at our historic legislative building. What we display now to the public should be our current principles and aspirations as North Carolina citizens. While some here today will try to minimize slavery and white supremacy's importance in the war, who can argue that many others have appropriated the monuments, the Confederate flag, and other symbols to support white supremacy? My initial inclination to just hide or destroy the monuments has given way to compromise. They should be moved where their context can be explained so that we may learn from the history. I am a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Thank you.
Skeet Joyner, Spring Hope.
Mine's going to be real short. I think we need to leave them where they're at, and we need to protect them while they're there.
Shannon writes, Winston-Salem.
I'm speaking on behalf of the North Carolina Order of Confederate Rose. We are a sister organization of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and our main purpose is to protect and promote Confederate history and symbols. We are against the governor's petition to remove the memorials on the state capitol grounds. This selective censorship of North Carolina's history is not only wrong, it is against the law. Our ancestors fought and died for states' rights. These memorials are in their remembrance of their sacrifice and serve as gravestones for those who did not return home to North Carolina, like my ancestors. Further, we question the purpose of the public hearing. Scheduled at this time in the afternoon on a weekday, how many regular working North Carolinians would you expect to attend? For those of us in attendance, it was no small matter to be here. There are many, many more who would be here if not for the strange time. As poll after poll has shown, the strong majority of North Carolinians do not support the governor's petition or the removal of Confederate memorials in general. Thank you.
Raymond T Winstead, Roxborough.
Good afternoon. I would like to clarify the main reason in which we are here today, the law. Within the wording of the General Statute 100-2.1, given the power to the North Carolina Historical Commission to rule over objects of remembrance, the wording of the governor is not mentioned. Therefore, he has no authority to petition for any removal of the memorials on the Capitol grounds for his personal views, and no criteria for their removal being met within the statutes. It is my opinion that the study committee declare his petition has no merit or authority and invalidate it. The notification of said petition be sent back to the governor, which would end this matter presented to the commission in September 2017. Thank you.
Larry Edelman, Raleigh.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here. I was born and raised right here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Old Rex Hospital, another one. I was educated right here in the local area in Wake County, and I've lived here all my life and been employed here all my life. I recently saw a plaque in a building that is located on the University of North Carolina system, and it goes as follows. It's titled Goals: Integrity in the pursuit, creation, application, and dissemination of knowledge, freedom of thought and expression, respect for cultural and intellectual diversity, responsibility for individual rights, actions and service to society, stewardship in sustaining economic and natural resources, excellence in all endeavors. I repeat, respect for cultural and intellectual diversity, and freedom of thought and expression. Out of sight and out of mind doesn't cut it. It belongs on the Capitol grounds with the World War I, World War II, and other war memorials. Out of sight does not cut it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Tara Brandau, Randleman.
Hi, I'm Native American, and I'm tired of watching all of our monuments wanting to take down. They're here for a reason. They're teaching of history, and removing it is not going to help stop history from repeating itself. It's protected. Stop breaking the laws. Leave them alone. We're all Americans. We need to stand up, and we need to worry about our veterans and our children and stop worrying about monuments. They've been there for a long time. Just keep them up.
Ryan Barnett, Sanford.
Taking down monuments and flags hasn't improved life anywhere it's been done. In New Orleans, crime is up since they took down Robert E. Lee's monument. Only 3 groups have been successful in taking down monuments in history: ISIS terrorists, Bolshevik communists in 1917, and modern communists in America. I remind the board members that the oath they swore is still in effect to both the U.S. Constitution and the state of North Carolina. Do not break your oath. The 3 Confederate monuments in question today are monuments to women and U.S. war veterans. They are protected by federal law, Title 18, U.S. Code 1369. As a veteran myself, who served in Afghanistan and Jordan, I do not condone any attempt to remove history in any fashion. We do not need any type of ISIS tactics in America. Thank you.
Stephen Marley, Burlington.
Yes, these monuments are for all the people of North Carolina. They were put up to represent the soldiers of North Carolina that were wounded, killed, or never returned. The government sent these young soldiers off to war to fight for our state. Now, a Democratic governor wants to distance himself from them. The Capitol represents the state, just like the monuments represent the soldiers of the state. So why would you take the monuments away from the Capitol that represents the soldiers of the state of North Carolina? Raleigh sent more soldiers and lost more soldiers than any other state that fought in the Confederate. And that's why we have the monuments in our capital. Now you want to move the monuments to Bentonville. These monuments do not represent the last major battle of North Carolina. They represent all the battles of North Carolina.
Paul Berry, Youngsville.
You see the tallest monument in Union Square, and it looks out on a street. Down that street, I have seen all my life, being a Cary native and living in Raleigh for a while, things growing, things progressing. And I think about that monument, and I think about how wonderful and resilient North Carolinians are in regards to facing trials and struggles. And as they do, they ride high and defeat them and are conquered and are not conquered by them. And what has happened? To be rather than to seem is our state motto. Those people in those days were being rather than seeming. And today, to be rather than to seem means that North Carolinians can resolve their conflicts And if the statues go anywhere else, that testimony is lost. Leave them where they are for the sake of the integrity and the historical testimony of our state and its people. Thank you.
Charles Lane, Raleigh.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Charles Lane. I'm a North Carolina native and a relative of Confederate veterans. I would ask that the Confederate monuments in question be moved from their position of preeminence in our state to a more suitable location. We as North Carolinians must address the implications of our history for the past and the present. When we were still a young state, we expressed a belief that government was of, by, and for the people. And yet some of us were denied the basic definitions of humanity. Our leaders at the time turned against our national constitution so that they might retain the right to subjugate entire groups of people. As leaders and as complicit citizens, we were wrong to rebel. The monuments in question are testaments to that rebellion. While we should not forget our actions, it is arrogant of us to honor a rebellion with the tallest statue on the Capitol grounds. We North Carolinians are not traitors to freedom and equality, and as such, we should not glorify these monuments to Confederacy at the seat of our state government. Thank you.
Mark Sweat, Garner.
The Confederate monuments should not be removed from the Capitol grounds. There is no valid reason to move them. It is merely a political scam. In every instance, wherever Confederate memorials have been removed, it has never been by the will of the majority of citizens, but only because of violent threats from communists and their allies, such is the case today. Do not, I repeat, do not give in to the terrorist actions of criminal leftists and the shreds of human debris that follow them. Stand up for the law and for order, something that our governor refuses to do. He is the Neville Chamberlain of our time. I warn you that if you surrender your integrity to pacify the left and their rabid followers, you will quickly learn that their unlawful demands come in installments. This is only the first of many blackmails they will employ by means of violence. Stop their madness now. Thank you.
Mary Griswold, Newbern.
Please don't move the monuments. They're part of history. The soldiers of the Confederacy from North Carolina fought bravely and with honor. The federal government recognized this by giving them veterans benefits and the right to be buried in national cemeteries. The monuments recognize the bravery and sacrifice of North Carolina's soldiers and the women who remained behind. They need to remain where they are. The major expense that would be incurred in moving them will not change history.
Robert Griswold, Newbern.
I ask you not to move or disturb the monuments. I retired from New England about 4.5 years ago down to the south. I am very proud of my ancestry back in New England. I am also proud of the ancestry that we have relatives that moved south. My family heritage came down here a long time ago, had factories down here. I am a veteran. I swore to protect and defend our country from enemies, foreign and domestic. I ask that monuments are reminders of our commitment to serve honorably. We need the physical and visual reminders of our history where they are. I am proud to bring my children down here and show them the monuments in this area. Please protect the monuments, protect the square from the Orwellian 1984 rewriting of history. Thank you.
Raynor James, Newbern.
The monuments should not be removed. Modern-day moralists are attempting to rewrite history. Moving monuments is part of that. They are misrepresenting the recent war of Northern aggression. Brave Southerners tried to repel invaders. They wanted to remain autonomous in terms of the ability to make financial decisions and control their own sovereign states. They had given limited responsibilities and purview over a few things that had to do with national defense and diplomacy. They fought very hard to repel people who tried to take that away from them. Very far into the war, or a good deal into the war, a very smart black man talked the president.
Hal James Newbern.
I was born in Winston-Salem. My family very quickly took me over to Davie County in Farmington, where my grandfather had been the postmaster there for a number of years. My family has a long history of military service. One of my great-grandfather, William Alexander James, was paroled at Macon. I took an oath myself to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. As a result of that oath, I spent 43 years, 4 months, and 10 days in the U.S. Army. My sons have both retired from the U.S. Army. My granddaughter had spent a tour as a female MP in Afghanistan, if you can imagine that. One of those statues that represents the efforts that women have put into the military service. I'm here to tell you that they have been the most neglected people and should be honored, and that particular statue is quite dear to me that needs to stay there. I represent an organization, Coastal Carolina Taxpayers Association. I'm the chairman, and we work to support and defend the Constitution. That's been my life's work. Thank you.
Don Scott Raleigh.
I'm a descendant of a Confederate soldier, in fact, several, but I also from a split family, and so I have ancestors on both sides. They were brothers. They were fighting each other. I wondered about what would happen if I looked at the rest of the country and how they felt about this question that we're asking. So I looked at a Civil War trust study that was recently done. You know, they put out millions and millions of dollars for preservation, Civil War preservation. The question, there were 7 of them, but I can say this, 83.2% of the responders, and remember there are hundreds of thousands of members, were in favor of not moving the monuments. 51.7% of those folks came from the Midwest and the Northeast. 17.2% came from the South and the Deep South. So you can see the rest of the country is in favor of keeping those monuments.
Time has expired. Wren King Clayton.
I'd like to speak for a minute on why the monuments are displayed in a prominent position and why they should stay there. The entire premise of the side supporting statue removal is that the statues represent a group of people who fought in a civil war in order to preserve slavery. The simple fact that they chose to go to war as opposed to simply signing the Corwin Amendment, which would have institutionalized slavery as a constitutional right, is incontrovertible evidence that the war was not about slavery. The war was fought over a consistent and unrelenting violation of the Constitution by the northern states. Look, we can all agree that slavery was egregious and the Fugitive Slave Clause should have been removed from the Constitution. However, the precedent cannot be allowed to stand unchallenged that the federal government can simply declare a portion of the Constitution to be immoral, can refuse to uphold that portion of the Constitution, and then ignore 2 direct orders of unconstitutionality from the Supreme Court. And that is unacceptable, and it must be met with the utmost and fiercest opposition up to and including warfare. That's what our ancestors did. They stood up against the tyrannical government who was running roughshod over the Constitution. They did so against all odds, outgunned, outsupplied, outnumbered.
Time has expired. Tiffany Patterson, Lewisburg.
Samuel Joyner, Henry Gillum, James Valentine. These are my Confederate ancestors, just a few of them. They were among the 125,000 North Carolinians who fought. There's a number I'd like this committee to consider, that 40,000 North Carolinians lost their life. And these monuments reflect that loss. And I ask that they be stayed on the Capitol grounds from the Piedmont into the mountains. Our soldiers answered the call and did what needed to be done. Thank you.
Christopher Nance, Carthage.
All across the Old North State, county and municipal historical committees look to the members of the North Carolina Historical Commission to set the example in regards to protecting and preserving the heritage of this great state. These committees work tirelessly and often voluntarily to protect our history because we recognize the importance of safeguarding our unique story for future generations, whether it be to enjoy or to learn from. I hope this committee will not serve as an exception. There is no more appropriate place for the memorials to our statewide veterans than the lawns of the historic Capitol building. The building, now serving as a museum, is perhaps the largest state memorial and is a testament to the many trials and tribulations that we as North Carolinians have endured over the last few centuries. The memorials accompanying that building should not be hidden away in some remote location to be forgotten and neglected, but should remain right where they are and serve as an instructional instrument for the students of today and tomorrow.
Time has expired. Gary Williamson, Snow Camp.
Those memorials that are on the state grounds are more than just concrete and blocks and whatnot. They are basically a grave for the men that never came back during the war. The Women's Confederate Monument is for the women that supported those men and sons and fathers that never got to come back. They never got to have a burial or see their dead come in a box or any sort of form. They're just gone, laying in a field on the soil somewhere that nobody ever got to see. Those are North Carolinians that are honored in those monuments on the state grounds. Myself, as a North Carolinian, a Tar Heel, a Confederate descendant, those monuments mean everything to me. As far as I'm concerned, and I think I speak for a lot of folks here, if it does further the agenda of Governor Cooper and we have to fight these battles, we will fight till hell freezes over and then we'll fight on ice. Thank you.
Gail Jennings, Durham.
One of the hardest things to do is to look at life through the eyes of another person, but from time to time we're called on to do just that. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I studied the Civil War, but had no direct contact to North Carolina until I moved here 6 years ago. I'd never seen a Confederate statue and wondered why they were on the grounds of what was, I thought, to be an impartial place for making laws for all of the people. And I understand that they represent brave men and women, and it must have taken a lot of courage to stand up against the government. And we know that doesn't always go in your favor. I'm not in favor of the Confederate monuments being on the Capitol grounds. As far as I know, there is no one buried there, but I do depend on the process that we have to hear each other out. And if the next thing comes up,
Melvin L. Mitchell, Durham.
I am a citizen of Durham, North Carolina, and a descendant of a family from eastern North Carolina, and I think these monuments are extremely important. I do not think they should be kept on the Capitol grounds because they are monuments to a particular event in American history and North Carolina history, and they should be on a location that is appropriate to that. I believe the strategy proposed is appropriate. I believe any approach other than that would make people think that North Carolina is remaining in the past rather than looking to unite and move forward to the future. I also would call your attention to the issue of learning history at the place. Fort Fisher would be an appropriate place for these monuments, rather than the place where decisions are being made for the future of the state.
Carolyn S. Smithson, Burlington.
I'm here today to speak on behalf of the North Carolina Order of Confederate Roses. We oppose the governor's petition and maintain that removal of the Confederate memorials on the Capitol grounds is in violation of the law. These memorials honor brave men who answered the call of their beloved state. They should remain on the grounds for the benefit of the future generations. Thank you.
James Smithson, Burlington.
Sir, I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I served for my country. And I think the memorials to our veterans should remain where they are and not be removed. They represent all North Carolinians who fought for their state. It is no more a memorial to slavery than the Vietnam ones are to segregation. How many veterans today fight for racism? But racism exists. The two are not related no more than slavery was to these people that fought for their country during that time. It's a veterans memorial. Those statues are to veterans, and they should be protected and left alone. Thank you.
Abraham Jones, Raleigh.
I believe the monument should be removed and sent to Bentonville. I'm a civil war. However, the Civil War was fought, and there would have been two results had they won. The United States would not exist as it exists now. You can never forget that. And secondly, a whole group of people, African Americans, might still be in slavery, which was an evil. The monument should be removed and sent to Bentonville and honored there. And I'd be willing to support that. You could even build a Confederate museum there like they have in Richmond. But to continue this cause, we've gone on too long. It rips us apart. It's a shame. And I stand as an African American man, 65 years old, who studied the Civil War and been to many states. But these monuments need to be removed from the Capitol that belongs to everybody. And that's my submission. Thank you.
Dwayne Aaron, Fayetteville.
I'm a retired U.S. Army officer, graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, class of 71, with 24 years of active service, including a combat duty tour in Operation Just Cause in Panama, and also Operation Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Although my service and that of our state's Confederate veterans are separated by more than a century of time, there's a respect and admiration for the bravery and sacrifice among soldiers that transcends time. We hold to the belief that we will leave no one behind, and those that fall will not be forgotten. North Carolina sent more than 120,000 of her sons into battle in our nation's great fratricidal war. Nearly a third of those perished. Thousands more died while imprisoned in hellish POW camps like Elmira, Fort Delaware, and Point Lookout. They deserve to be remembered, and they have earned a place of honor on the Capitol grounds. Thank you.
Gary Harris, Knightdale.
Thank you. Excuse my voice. Thank you for letting me speak today. I believe that the governor has put you in a very difficult position. I agree with the gentleman who stated that I don't think that you need to take a position here. I work in the state government lobbying, and I see committees charged with ideas all the time. And once this idea is charged to them, they feel like they have to take an action. You have another choice. You don't have to say, yes, move them and make the majority of people mad. You don't have to say no and make the minority of people that want them moved mad. You can basically take no action. If the people that want these statues moved want them moved, they have the General Assembly to go to. They can have the debate there, and the Assembly can move it. You do not have to take any action on this event. The governor's put you in a bad position. I'm sorry that you're in it, but that would be the action I would recommend you take.
Nan Fulcher, Hillsborough.
Senator Phil Berger warned against moving these monuments, asserting that rewriting history is a fool's errand. But who exactly is threatening to rewrite history? You historians? In case you didn't know, history of the South was rewritten, woven into propaganda. The monuments were born of this propaganda, and they, along with other symbols of the Confederacy, have been used for propaganda to this day. I wish the monuments could simply honor military service and sacrifice of the families during wartime. That is a valid representation of their history. Many wish it was heritage, not hate, but the two are intertwined, negative overshadowing positive. And those responsible for marring the spirit of the monuments, why are they not the target of our collective outrage? Instead, we've been told to target Yankee historians and communists. Propaganda.
Time has expired.
Rusty Alphen LaGrange.
Good afternoon. I am vehemently against the removal of these statutes. Not only is it to be an illegal, but an immoral process and just a wrong decision. These statutes, or this, why we're here today, is more than just about statutes of stones. It's about a concerted effort by the leftists throughout this country, throughout this state, to eradicate our history, our culture in that regard. In the late war that we fought in the South for Southern independence, which was not a civil war, we fought against an overbearing government. We're fighting that fight again today. As in other countries who have collapsed, Rhodesia, South Africa, Russia, many others, they fought or they collapsed from within. One of the tactics was used was to eradicate statutes and history in those countries.
Nancy Brinkley, Newbern.
Yes, thank you. Please keep the monuments at their legal resting place. We people own the property where the monuments rest. The Henry Lawson, the women of Confederate monuments, they rest there. They are historical gifts and markers of place with historic value to the people, especially to women. Moving does not solve the true problem. Funds to move is wasteful, nor does this correct the imposition on honor due, nor resolve the crisis of bad education or emotions on the monuments that are misunderstood. Thank you for listening.
Tommy D. Richardson, Zebulon.
Yes, I'm just a citizen of North Carolina. My family comes from Johnson County. Between the law and the history of North Carolina, the attempt to remove the statues is by a few, not by a lot. They're trying to change history of North Carolina, whether they were born in the South or not. Please do not let the few act as the voice of North Carolina, because the majority does not agree. Please don't let the few start to tell our state government what they can do. The group has more rights than what they had back then. Why are they scared of the past? We are living in the present and the future, not the past. Thank you.
Keith Jones, Graham.
These are memorials to soldiers that went to war because North Carolina required them to. Just like the government required soldiers to go to Vietnam. And the common soldier cared little about politics. They cared that their government asked them to go. If political motives are factored into every one of our war memorials behind the triggers behind war, then pretty soon all war memorials will be gone. There's no more appropriate place for these war memorials than on the Capitol grounds. Thank you.
Michael McElrath, Carborough.
I speak as a historian of the South, a native Charlestonian, and a Tar Heel by choice for the last 20 years, and I guess from what I've heard today, also as a terrorist and a communist. I have no idea if any of my ancestors fought in the Civil War, but I guess some of them did. I would guess they did. I neither revere nor disparage their memory. May they rest in peace. However, I love my hometown. I cannot tell you the pain it caused me when Dylan Roof slaughtered 9 of my fellow Charlestonians on June 17, 2015. He was and is a mixed-up young and hate-filled man, and to me, there's no escaping the fact that part of what infected his soul was a set of myths about the past. Understanding history requires often the acceptance of some painful truths, and it's a painful truth that our nation's history is bound up with the institution of slavery. The Civil War was fought primarily over the question of whether slavery would continue to thrive. Please consider removing the monuments to Bentonville. I don't know if that's the best place for them, but I can tell you any place would be better than the common ground that all of us as North Carolinians share.
Leo Tombora, Carey.
I believe one of the most important factors to consider when deciding what to do with these monuments is the timing of their placement. Like many other monuments, those in question were placed decades after the conclusion of the Civil War. This was a time at the height of Jim Crow and other forms of racial oppression. For this reason, I think it is hard to ignore their racist past, and this is why I feel they should be moved from the state capitol, land representing all North Carolinians, to a historical context where they belong.
Sarah Woodard David, Raleigh.
First off, I hope my father's not listening. I'm a 10th generation North Carolinian on both sides of my family, and I have birthed an 11th generation. My ancestors participated in a slave-based economy because they were either inhumane and felt that slavery was okay or the right thing to do, or because they were cowards and didn't speak up against it. These monuments are a mask. They are whitewashed over my ancestors' cowardice or inhumanity. I would like to see them removed entirely, not even to Bentonville. I would like their removal to symbolize our evolution, to show the world that we've become less cowardly and more humane, and that we're ready to be honest about our history.
Winifred Richardson, Nightdale.
I am a veteran and also a descendant of slave. And the monuments, when I walk past the monuments, they turn my stomach. I feel like that the war morally should have never been fought, and those who participated on the Confederate side were traitors to the United States of America. There should be no monuments for traitors. Thank you.
Joanne Clayton, Nightdale.
I am a state representative. I love this state, but this state has been wrong. They are looking as if Confederate was not about slavery, and everyone in this room and everyone in this world knows it was. Slavery was wrong. It was a violation of human dignity. They know it was wrong, and they want to be proud of ancestors' fable tales about the Confederacy. It's a fable tale. It's not reality. The reality is slavery was wrong, the Confederates were traitors, and we have statues to traitors that need to be removed. They need to be removed wherever you put them. Where you want to put them in a historical spot, fine. So you all can joke around with your Confederate flags, but it's wrong. Deal with it. Live up to what you did wrong and remove these evil, violent, just terrible to see. Our children all have to see it, not just your little only white children, all of us, and it's wrong.
Willis E. McCoy, Garner.
I have a couple of questions. I'm going to be a little different than everybody else. Were any of these people skinheads that are the statues? Were any of them members of the Ku Klux Klan? Were any of them Nazis? Because that's who used the symbols of the Confederacy now. And until they take their heritage back, I don't think they have much to say about where the statues should be. They should be removed. They have no business being on the state grounds. They should be put at Bentonville as the last resort. But again, until they can take back their heritage, they have no heritage to talk about.
Melissa Mason, Raleigh.
Hi, thank you. So I'm born and still live in Raleigh, North Carolina. My family is from Garner and from Lewisburg. We are true, proud Southerners. I've spent 2.5 years supporting the troops at Aviano NATO base in Italy during the Afghanistan war, and I want the statues moved. I live 2 blocks from here. I hate the fact that I walk past these statues all the time. I have the utmost respect for my family members, my heritage, and our troops today. I am not supporting destroying the statues in any way or any offense to anyone. However, I don't want to walk past them anymore. I want them moved. I want them gone. They don't belong where they're at.
Are there others who wish to speak? Mr. Chairman, this public hearing is scheduled until 3:30, so we will remain to wait until the end, till 3:30, to see if any other individuals wish to speak to the committee.
I as chairman, do appreciate again the contributions of your thoughts and opinions. And particularly, again, thank you for conducting it in such a way that was respectful to all involved. But as Dr. Cherry has indicated, under the constraints of the open meetings law, then it was publicized to be open until 3:30. We will remain here. So for those of you that wish to stay, you're welcome. But we will remain here in case other people do come in to sign up to share their opinions. Thank you very much.